I never thought I'd be staring down the barrel of a gun in my own lake house, especially not by people claiming to be from the homeowners association. But then again, I never thought a lot of things would happen in Lakeside Pines. That's just how life works sometimes. My name is Daniel Barton, and until 6 months ago, my idea of home security meant remembering to lock the front door at night. Now I know better. Now I understand that suburban warfare exists, and it wears khaki pants and carries a clipboard. It was a crisp October evening when I first drove up to my newly purchased lake house in northern Minnesota. The 2-story cedar cabin sat on 3 acres of wooded land with 200 feet of pristine shoreline on Lake Vermilion. After 15 years of grinding away at my software company in Minneapolis, I'd finally saved enough to buy my dream vacation property. At 42, I figured I deserved a place to decompress on weekends, maybe eventually retire to. The realtor had mentioned something about a homeowners association, but assured me it was very hands-off. The annual dues were reasonable at $350, mainly covering snow removal from the shared access road and upkeep of the community dock. I'd lived in an HOA neighborhood before and knew they could be a mixed bag, but the prospect of minimal maintenance requirements seemed worth the trade-off. For the first 3 weekends, everything was perfect. I spent my days fishing off my private dock, grilling on the deck, and enjoying the fall colors. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, mostly other professionals from Minneapolis and Duluth who used their properties as weekend getaways. Then I met Patricia Kendall. I was installing a new mailbox at the end of my driveway when a silver Lexus SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down to reveal a woman with a blonde bob cut, oversized sunglasses, and what I'd come to recognize as the universal expression of HOA displeasure. "Excuse me," she said, not bothering with an introduction. "That mailbox isn't approved by the association." I straightened up, confused. "I'm sorry. The Lakeside Pines HOA has strict guidelines about mailbox designs." "That one," she gestured dismissively at my simple black metal box, "doesn't meet our aesthetic standards." I looked at the mailbox, then back at her. "It's just a standard mailbox. The realtor didn't mention anything about specific mailbox requirements." Well, he should have. She reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a thick binder. "Here's the complete rulebook. You'll need to submit a mailbox request form for approval before installing anything." She thrust the binder at me through the window. I reluctantly took it. "And you are?" "Patricia Kendall, HOA president." She said it like she was announcing herself as the Queen of England. "I live in the White House with blue shutters down by the boat launch." "Nice to meet you, Patricia. I'm Daniel Barton, just moved in a few weeks ago." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I know. Please review the guidelines and have that mailbox removed by next weekend. The association can recommend several approved styles." Before I could respond, she'd rolled up her window and driven off, leaving me holding a 5-pound binder of rules I'd apparently agreed to when purchasing the property. That night, I flipped through the HOA Bible. The document contained regulations for everything imaginable: approved exterior paint colors, various shades of brown and green, maximum lawn height, 3.5 inches, prohibited vehicles, boats over 24 feet, RVs, commercial trucks, and yes, an entire section dedicated to acceptable mailbox designs, all of which looked like they belonged outside a colonial mansion rather than a lake cabin. I sighed and texted my friend Thomas, who owned a cabin a few lakes over. "Just met the HOA president. I think I've made a terrible mistake." His response was immediate. "Kendall, the dragon lady, good luck, man." The next morning, I dutifully removed my unapproved mailbox and drove 30 miles to the nearest hardware store that carried one of the acceptable designs, a needlessly ornate cast iron box that cost 4 times what I'd paid for the original. I spent the afternoon installing it, making sure it was precisely the mandated 42 inches from the ground and exactly parallel to the road. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next 2 months, I received 4 violation notices. One for storing my kayak on the side of the house, visible from the lake. Another for leaving my garbage bin at the curb 12 hours after collection. A third for installing a bird feeder without prior approval. And finally, a warning about excessive noise when I had 3 friends over for a Saturday afternoon barbecue. Each notice came with a smiling visit from Patricia, who delivered them with all the glee of someone who'd found their life's calling in policing the minutiae of other people's properties. By December, I'd grown weary of the constant surveillance. The lake house that was supposed to be my sanctuary had become a source of stress. I started visiting less frequently, making excuses to stay in the city rather than deal with Patricia's latest complaint. It was during the Christmas holiday when things escalated beyond petty annoyances. I'd invited my brother Richard and his family to spend the week at the lake house. We arrived on December 23rd, the car packed with gifts, food, and enough winter gear to survive an Arctic expedition. My niece and nephew were ecstatic about spending Christmas on the frozen lake, planning ice fishing and snowmobiling adventures. The first problem arose when Richard parked his SUV in the driveway. Within an hour, Patricia was at our door. "Mr. Barton," she said, eyeing the vehicle behind me. The association rules clearly state that guest vehicles must be parked in designated guest areas or in the garage. I took a deep breath. "Patricia, it's Christmas. My brother's family is visiting for the week, and they have luggage and gifts to unload. The car will be moved to the garage once we're settled. Rules don't take holidays, Mr. Barton." She handed me a notice. "Please move the vehicle within the hour or you'll face a $50 fine." From behind me, Richard spoke up. "Are you serious? It's 20 degrees out, we have 2 kids, and we're still unloading." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "And you are, Richard Barton, Daniel's brother and apparently an unauthorized parker." "Well, Mr. Barton, when your brother purchased property in Lakeside Pines, he agreed to abide by our community standards which apply to all residents and their guests." I intervened before Richard could respond. "The car will be moved soon, Patricia. Thank you for the reminder." She nodded stiffly and turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Barton, I noticed you've installed Christmas lights on your exterior. The blue ones on your porch are not on the approved holiday lighting color palette. White, warm white, and amber only." That's when I nearly lost it. "You're kidding, right? You're policing Christmas light colors now? Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Holiday Decoration Addendum. You signed off on it when you purchased the property." She smiled thinly. "Happy holidays." After she left, Richard turned to me. "How do you live with this?" I shook my head. "I'm starting to wonder the same thing." We moved the car and changed the lights, but the festive mood had been dampened. That night, after the kids were asleep, Richard and I sat on the deck with beers, watching the snow fall over the frozen lake. "You need to do something about this," he said. "This isn't normal, even for an HOA." "What am I supposed to do? I signed the agreement when I bought the place." "Have you talked to other homeowners? I can't imagine everyone's happy with Queen Patricia's reign." He had a point. In my efforts to avoid conflict, I'd also avoided connecting with my neighbors. Maybe it was time to start building some alliances. The next day, Christmas Eve, I made rounds to the few other cabins that showed signs of occupation during the winter season. I brought cookies as a peace offering and introduced myself properly to my neighbors. What I discovered was illuminating. Most homeowners felt the same way I did, intimidated, annoyed, and increasingly resentful of Patricia's iron-fisted rule. Martin and Teresa Patel, who owned the cabin 2 doors down, revealed that Patricia had recently pushed through a bylaw change allowing the HOA to impose larger fines without a full board vote. "Where's the rest of the board?" I asked, accepting a mug of mulled wine from Teresa. "That's part of the problem," Martin explained. 3 of the 5 board members are winter residents only. Patricia schedules critical votes during January and February when she knows they won't be here. "That doesn't seem legal," I said. Teresa shrugged. Technically, she sends notices to their permanent addresses in Minneapolis. By the time they get them, the vote has already happened. And the other board member, besides Patricia, Gerald Hoffman, lives in the big frame at the end of the cove. He's Patricia's cousin and votes however she tells him to. I visited 3 more neighbors that day, hearing similar stories of frustration. Everyone had their own Patricia encounter to share. Fines for unapproved garden gnomes, citations for the wrong type of window treatments, warnings about unauthorized tree trimming. By the time I returned to my cabin, I was convinced that Patricia Kendall wasn't just an overzealous HOA president, she was running a small-scale dictatorship. Christmas Day provided a brief respite from HOA drama. We spent the day opening gifts, building snowmen with the kids, and roasting a turkey that filled the cabin with delicious aromas. For a few hours, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with the lake house in the first place. The peace was shattered the next morning when I found a notice taped to my front door. It cited me for unauthorized gathering of residents for the purpose of discussing HOA matters without proper notification to the board. She's monitoring who visits your house, Richard was incredulous. That's crossing a line from annoying to creepy, I agreed. It was time to take action, but I needed to be smart about it. After Richard and his family left on December 27th, I started researching HOA laws in Minnesota. I discovered that while homeowners associations have considerable power, there are limits, and Patricia had been exceeding them in multiple ways. I consulted with an attorney who specialized in property law. She confirmed my suspicions. Many of the fines and restrictions being imposed were either excessive or improperly enacted without full board approval or proper notice to all homeowners. Armed with this knowledge, I began building a case. I collected testimonies from neighbors, documented improper notices, and compiled a list of bylaws that had been changed without following proper procedures. By mid-January, I had enough evidence to challenge Patricia's authority at the next HOA meeting scheduled for February 1st. What I didn't realize was that Patricia had her own surveillance network. The day before the meeting, I received a call from Martin Patel. "Daniel, be careful," he warned. "Patricia knows you're gathering information against her. She's been telling people you're a troublemaker trying to destroy property values by eliminating necessary regulations." "How would she know what I'm doing?" I asked. Remember Gerald Hoffman, her cousin on the board. His son Tyler works for the same security company that occasionally patrols the community. Word is, he's been driving by your place and reporting back on your visitors. The revelation was unsettling. I thanked Martin for the warning and decided to proceed with caution. The February meeting would still be my opportunity to address the issues, but I needed to be prepared for Patricia's counterattack. The meeting was held in the small community building near the boat launch. Nearly 30 homeowners attended, an unusually high turnout according to the whispers around me. Patricia presided from a table at the front, flanked by Gerald Hoffman, and a young man I assumed was Tyler, dressed in a dark blue uniform with a patch reading Lakeside Security. After covering routine business, Patricia opened the floor for new items. I raised my hand immediately. "Mr. Barton," she acknowledged me with a tight smile. "You have something to add?" I stood, feeling the eyes of every homeowner on me. "Yes, I'd like to discuss concerns about how certain HOA rules have been implemented and enforced recently." For the next 10 minutes, I presented my findings calmly and factually. I explained how several bylaw changes had been enacted without proper notice or voting procedures, how fines had been increased beyond the limits specified in our covenants, and how surveillance of homeowners' private activities exceeded the HOA's authority. As I spoke, I noticed many homeowners nodding in agreement. Patricia's face grew increasingly flushed, but she maintained her composure until I finished. "Mr. Barton," she replied, her voice icy, "while I appreciate your enthusiasm as a new resident, You clearly don't understand how things work in Lakeside Pines. The measures you're questioning are necessary to maintain our community standards and property values." "I understand the purpose of an HOA," I countered, "but the association needs to operate within its legal bounds and with transparency to all homeowners." Several others spoke up in support of my points. Even Gerald Hoffman looked uncomfortable as multiple residents shared their own experiences with excessive fines and intrusive monitoring. Sensing she was losing control of the meeting, Patricia abruptly called for adjournment, claiming we had exceeded the allotted time. Before anyone could object, she gathered her papers and strode out, Gerald and Tyler following close behind. The confrontation had gone better than I expected. Several neighbors approached me afterward to express their support and share additional information. We agreed to form a committee to review the HOA bylaws and call for a special election of new board members. For the next month, things were relatively quiet. I visited my lake house on weekends without receiving any violation notices, though I often spotted Tyler's security vehicle driving slowly past my property. The neighbors and I continued to build our case, preparing for a special meeting we had officially requested for March 15th. Then, in early March, I received a certified letter informing me that I owed $2,750 in unpaid HOA fines and late fees. According to the letter, if the amount wasn't paid within 15 days, the association would place a lien on my property. I immediately called the attorney I'd consulted earlier. She reviewed the list of alleged violations, most of which I had never been properly notified about, and assured me that the HOA's actions were legally questionable. She agreed to send a response letter demanding documentation for each violation and challenging the association's right to impose the fines without proper notice. 2 days before the special meeting, I drove up to the lake house with a renewed determination to end Patricia's reign. I arrived late Friday evening after a grueling week at work, looking forward to a quiet night before the confrontation the next day. That's when everything went from absurd to dangerous. I had just finished unpacking and was making a sandwich when headlights swept across my kitchen window. Curious, I peeked outside to see 2 SUVs pulling into my driveway, their doors marked with Lakeside security logos. 4 men in dark uniforms exited the vehicles and approached my front door. Before I could react, there was a loud pounding. "Lakeside security, open up." I cautiously opened the door to find 4 stern-faced men, one of whom I recognized as Tyler Hoffman. Another man, older and heavyset with a buzz cut, stepped forward. "Daniel Barton, I'm Chief Randall with Lakeside Pines Security. We've received reports of unauthorized renovations being conducted on this property without HOA approval. We need to perform an inspection." I frowned, keeping the door partially closed. "What unauthorized renovations? I haven't done anything to the house." "Sir, we have documentation indicating you've modified interior structures that could impact the integrity of neighboring properties. As per Section 12 of the HOA agreement, we have authority to inspect for compliance." Something felt very wrong. "I'd like to see this documentation." "And I don't recall any provision giving private security the right to enter homes." The man claiming to be Chief Randall produced a document that, at a glance, looked official, but upon closer inspection was clearly not a legal warrant or court order. It was HOA letterhead signed by Patricia Kendall, authorizing security personnel to conduct necessary inspections. "This isn't a legal right of entry," I said firmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property." That's when the situation escalated dramatically. Tyler and another security officer suddenly pushed forward, forcing the door open and shoving me backward. 2 more men entered behind them, closing the door. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, regaining my balance. "You can't just force your way in." "Mr. Barton, don't make this difficult," Randall said, his hand moving to his hip where I noticed, with alarm, what appeared to be a holstered handgun. We're authorized to use reasonable means to ensure compliance. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about HOA rules anymore. These men weren't legitimate security conducting an inspection, this was something far more sinister. "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone on the counter. Tyler moved quickly, grabbing my wrist. "That won't be necessary. We are the authorized security for this community." I yanked my arm free. "You're not police. You have no right to be in my home or to touch me." The situation was spiraling out of control. Randall nodded to the others, and suddenly two men grabbed my arms while Tyler began searching through my kitchen drawers. "What are you looking for?" I demanded, struggling against their grip. "Documentation of your violations," Randall replied smoothly. "And evidence of your campaign to undermine the homeowners association." It hit me then this wasn't about inspections or renovations at all. This was Patricia's way of intimidating me before the meeting, possibly finding something she could use against me, or worse, planting evidence of violations. "This is breaking and entering," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my rising panic. "What you're doing is illegal." Randall smirked. "We have authorization from the HOA president. Your agreement gives us this authority." "No HOA agreement in the world allows armed men to forcibly enter a private residence," I countered. "You know that." For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker in the eyes of one of the younger security officers. But Tyler and Randall seemed unfazed, continuing to rifle through my belongings while the two men restrained me. I had to act. Using a self-defense move I'd learned years ago, I suddenly dropped my weight, twisting to break free from the guard's grip. The moment of surprise gave me just enough time to lunge for my phone. I managed to grab it and hit the emergency call button before Tyler tackled me to the ground. The phone skidded across the floor, but I could hear the 911 operator's voice responding. "Help!" I shouted as loudly as I could. "Home invasion at 1478 Lakeview Drive, men with guns claiming to be security." Tyler clamped a hand over my mouth, but it was too late, the call had connected. Randall cursed and kicked the phone away, but the damage was done. "Restrain him," he ordered. "We need to clear out." They zip-tied my hands behind my back and forced me into a chair at my dining table. The four men huddled in whispered conversation, clearly debating their next move. I caught fragments. "Wasn't supposed to go this way. Patricia said he'd back down. Real cops will be here soon." Their plan, whatever it had been, was unraveling, but rather than flee, Randall seemed to make a decision. He approached me with a document. "Sign this," he demanded, placing a paper before me and removing my restraints. "It's a statement acknowledging your violations and agreeing to withdraw your complaints against the HOA." I glanced at the document, a hastily prepared confession to various infractions I hadn't committed, and an agreement to resign from the community and sell my property within 90 days. "You're insane if you think I'm signing this," I said. "Your choice," Randall replied coldly. "But consider your options carefully. This can end easily, or it can get much more complicated." The implicit threat hung in the air. I was about to respond when suddenly blue and red lights flashed through my windows. The wail of sirens grew louder as multiple vehicles pulled into my driveway. Randall's face darkened. "Nobody say anything," he instructed his men, then to me. "This was a legitimate security inspection that you escalated. Remember that." Moments later, there was a commanding knock at the door. "Sheriff's Department, open the door." Randall moved to answer it, composing his features into a professional mask. As soon as he opened the door, however, 3 deputies entered with weapons drawn. "Everyone put your hands where I can see them," the lead deputy ordered. The scene that followed was chaotic but swift. The deputies quickly assessed the situation, noting my zip tie marks and the disarray of my home. When Randall attempted to explain, they were conducting an authorized HOA inspection. The deputy in charge, Sergeant Reynolds, wasn't buying it. "Let me see your security credentials and the legal documentation authorizing entry to this residence," he demanded. Randall produced his security company ID and Patricia's letter. Sergeant Reynolds examined them briefly before handing them to another deputy. "This isn't a legal entry authorization," he stated flatly, "and your security license doesn't grant you police powers or the right to forcibly enter private property." "The Homeowners Association bylaws," Randall began, "don't supersede state law," Reynolds cut him off. "All of you, turn around and place your hands behind your backs. You're being detained while we sort this out." One by one, the security officers were handcuffed and seated in my living room. A female deputy took my statement, photographing my wrists where the zip ties had left marks and documenting the forced entry evidence around my door. As they were processing the scene, another vehicle arrived, Patricia Kendall's silver Lexus. She strode up to my porch with the confidence of someone who expected to resolve a minor misunderstanding. Her expression changed dramatically when she saw the handcuffed security team in my living room. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "I'm Patricia Kendall, president of the Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association." Sergeant Reynolds turned to her. "Madam, did you authorize these men to enter Mr. Barton's residence?" "I authorized them to conduct a routine inspection as permitted by our bylaws," she said, her voice taking on an official tone. "Mr. Barton has a history of violations and non-compliance. Did you authorize them to force entry if he refused?" Patricia hesitated. "Our rules allow for inspections. That's not what I asked," Reynolds interrupted. "Did you specifically instruct or authorize these men to forcibly enter his home if he didn't voluntarily permit them inside?" Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "I may have suggested they should be thorough in their inspection. She told us to do whatever necessary to get documentation of his violations," Tyler suddenly interjected, apparently deciding to save himself. "She said we needed evidence before the meeting tomorrow." Patricia's face flushed with anger. "That is absolutely not true. I would never, madam," Reynolds cut in again. "I'm going to need you to step outside with Deputy Garcia and provide a full statement." As Patricia was escorted out, I could hear her protesting her innocence and invoking the names of various local officials she apparently knew personally. Over the next hour, the full story emerged. Patricia, threatened by my challenge to her authority, had hired Randall's private security company, not the regular community patrol service, to intimidate me and find or plant evidence of violations before the special meeting. What was supposed to be a scare tactic had escalated into a home invasion when I refused to cooperate. By midnight, all the four security officers, Randall, and Patricia had been arrested and transported to the county jail. The charges included breaking and entering, unlawful restraint, impersonating security officers. 3 of them weren't actually licensed, assault, and conspiracy. I spent that night at Martin and Teresa Patel's cabin, still shaken by the experience. The next morning, instead of the special HOA meeting we had planned, we had an impromptu gathering of concerned homeowners at the community building. The story spread quickly throughout Lakeside Pines. Residents were horrified to learn how far Patricia had gone to maintain her control. Gerald Hoffman, the only remaining board member present, looked shell-shocked as he tried to distance himself from his cousin's actions. "I had no idea she was doing any of this," he insisted to the assembled homeowners. "Yes, I supported her on votes, but I never knew about falsified violations or hired thugs." Whether anyone believed him or not, Gerald resigned his position on the spot. With both Patricia and Gerald out, we proceeded to hold an emergency election of interim board members to manage the HOA until a formal election could be organized. I was nominated to serve as interim president, a position I accepted with some reluctance but a firm commitment to reform the association. My first actions were to suspend all outstanding violation notices pending review, reduce excessive fines to reasonable levels, and establish a transparent process for rule enforcement. The legal aftermath continued for months. Patricia and the security officers faced multiple felony charges. Randall, it turned out, had a previous conviction for similar intimidation tactics at another community, operating under a different company name. The legitimacy of his security license was questionable at best. Patricia's defense strategy was to claim she never intended for any laws to be broken. She had merely hired security to document violations and had been misunderstood. The evidence against her was substantial, however, including text messages to Randall discussing the need to make an example of me before I could cause trouble at the meeting. 6 months after that terrifying night, justice was served. Randall received 5 years for his role as the leader of the home invasion, with additional time for his prior offenses. The other security officers received sentences ranging from 18 months to 3 years, depending on their level of involvement and prior records. Patricia Kendall pleaded guilty to reduced charges of criminal conspiracy and misuse of HOA authority. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay substantial restitution to me and other homeowners who had been victimized by her fraudulent fines and enforcement actions. The audit of HOA finances that followed revealed another layer of corruption. Patricia had been diverting portions of collected fines into a separate account for administrative expenses that primarily funded her own travel and shopping habits. This discovery led to additional charges of embezzlement and fraud. As for me, I kept my lake house. Under new leadership, I stepped down from the interim presidency after 3 months, having helped establish proper procedures. The HOA transformed into what it should have been all along: a reasonable organization focused on maintaining community standards without trampling on homeowners' rights. My mailbox? It's now a simple black metal one, just like the one I originally installed. The new HOA guidelines, approved by a majority vote of all residents, focus on safety and necessary maintenance rather than aesthetic micromanagement. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my dock watching the sunset over Lake Vermilion, I think about how easily an organization designed to protect community interests can transform into a vehicle for control and intimidation in the wrong hands. The experience changed me. I'm more vigilant about my rights now, more willing to question authority, and paradoxically, more involved in my community. Last weekend, Martin and Teresa joined me for a barbecue on my deck. As we watched the neighborhood kids playing on the shared beach, Teresa raised her glass in a toast. "To Daniel," she said, "who taught us all that sometimes you have to fight for your right to have the wrong color mailbox." We laughed, but there was truth in the jest. The Lakeside Pines community had learned a valuable lesson about the balance between community standards and individual rights, and about the dangers of giving too much power to those who enjoy wielding it over others. My lake house is finally what I always wanted it to be: a peaceful retreat where the only rules that truly matter are being a good neighbor and respecting the natural beauty that drew us all here in the first place. As for Patricia Kendall, I heard she sold her house while awaiting trial. The new owners painted it a cheerful yellow, a color that would have given the old HOA president a coronary. Somehow, that feels like the perfect epilogue to our community's strange and troubling chapter. The best part: when I drive up to my lake house now, I feel only peace. No anxiety about what violation I might be committing, no dread about confrontations with clipboard-wielding tyrants. Just the simple pleasure of arriving at a place where I belong, on my own terms. And if there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that true community doesn't come from rigid enforcement of rules about mailbox designs and Christmas light colors. It comes from neighbors who check on each other during winter storms, who share tools and recipes and stories around bonfires, who respect differences while finding common ground. Every HOA in America should remember that. Some have, many haven't. But in Lakeside Pines, we'll never forget the lesson or the night fake security officers learned that breaking into the wrong lake house can lead to real handcuffs and serious jail time.